Hey, everybody. Once again, welcome to Youth Ministry and Mentorship 101. I'm Eric Jean Baptiste, and just wanting to say that, hey, ministers need to grow in their relationship with Christ just as much as any member. So, we're going to talk about that and other things with today's guest. This is Youth Ministry and Mentorship 101. All right, everyone, welcome back. Today I am graced by the presence of with Sarah Cadet. Should I call you? Is it appropriate to
Sarah's
call you
just fine. Yeah.
Sarah Cadet? Is just
Yeah.
fine. Okay, I was gonna go for pastor or whatever, but if you like Sarah Cadet, that's perfectly awesome.
That is just
So,
fine.
how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing really good actually. It's the holiday season, so people are a little nicer in the community. So I'm doing well.
Awesome, awesome. All right. With that, let's start off by having you give a short bio about yourself and what led you to where you are now in ministry.
Okay, so long story short, I knew I wanted, when I was younger, I remember going to my family and going to my mother and saying, I either want to be a teacher, I want to be a pastor. But I was told that women can't be in ministry. And so I was like, okay, I'll be a teacher. So I went into English and secondary education for my undergrad in New York. Um, Right after graduation, I was in a position actually as a preschool teacher. But what I was told is that if I go into my master's in anything that has to do with um, elementary education, that I can keep the position and get get a higher pay. Um, as long as that would be my next move. And along that time, while I was done student teaching in the high schools and middle schools, and I was teaching as a preschool teacher, the call to be a pastor was stronger on me. Um, I told the Lord it can't be because your word told me that I can't be a pastor. Um, but the tug was stronger and stronger. And after my kids graduated from preschool, I remember looking around in the classroom and saying, "This isn't it." And God made it very clear to me by a sermon by Pastor Edley Benoit that I had to come to Andrews. And so right now I'm completing my master's in divinity. Not saying that I'm letting go of education. I know that's still part of my call, but this is a part of my call that I was trying to deny for so long. And so that's the long story short of my bio.
Wow. All right. There's two things I want to highlight from what you said. And the second thing will be a question to you. But the first thing I wanted to do is give a little shout out to Pastor Hedley Benoit
Yes.
because it's interesting how certain ministers and preachers can make a lasting impact by their words, especially when they're led by the Holy Spirit. And um, I remember a long, long time ago, back when he was just a preacher, a young preacher, Pastor Edley Benoit preaching a sermon called "What Time Is It?" And it's still one of the sermons that I remember. I mean, I've heard hundreds of sermons, and a lot of them have gone in one ear and out the other. That sermon is still in my mind, so I wanted to give him a little shout out. And
Wow.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, because
Yes.
that sermon, uh, you mentioned it. It still made a massive impact in your life. Let
Yes.
me. Have you ever gone up to him and said, "Man, that sermon"?
Oh yeah, he knows. He
Awesome.
knows. After the sermon, because what had happened was this. I was asked that day to, it was education day in my church. And
Mm,
I was asked that day to go and give like a speech kind of a thing. And so I said, okay, Lord, what am I going to say? And I made certain points. But the last point I made was that there is no peace outside of God's will. Like when God calls you to do something, you will not have peace until you walk into that, you walk that path. And so Edley was actually running late. And I think it was a divine thing because God knows if he made it that he was there, I think I would have been like, well, it's just a coincidence. Maybe he just, maybe he's just repeating some of the things I said in my speech. But he was running late. He hadn't heard the sermon at all. I mean, the speech at all. And when he was preaching, he was hitting the same points that I hit in my speech. And he ended with the fact that there's no peace outside of God's will. And he was giving his testimony of how he left law, I believe, to come into ministry and all these things. And I was just crying. And so right after, I was like, this is what happened. And this is what I think God is telling me. But I don't know which school to go to and all this stuff. And he was like, oh, no, you have to go to Andrews. Like, just clears
mm,
out. No, you have to go to Andrews. And then, so he knows. He's very aware that God used him for me to
wow,
be here. Yeah.
that's amazing. That's awesome. And the other thing I wanted to touch on is something that I've noticed a lot is there was a time that you thought you couldn't be a minister, you couldn't
Yeah.
be a pastor, and
Yes.
was it told to you or it's
Oh yeah.
okay?
It was told to me, I don't want to say by who right
Of
now,
course, don't
because
have to.
yeah. But because they were kind of like, oh, that's nice, but women can't be pastors, right? And I was like, oh, okay. And then even when I saw female pastors in New York, I always heard how they were spoken about and how that's not God's will and that's not a good thing and all this stuff. And when I looked up sermons about it, the people who spoke against it, they were very angry and very adamant about making sure that people knew that it was something frowned upon. So my experience was, okay, this is really not a good thing. It might even be something demonic or evil, you
Wow.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I brought it up is because it's something that I've seen repeated. It's not what your experience is not isolated. There has been
Mhm.
other women who have openly stated that that's been told to them.
Mhm.
And what's really interesting is how a person will say that, and then the Holy Spirit says something completely
Mhm.
different and lead them into ministry. And you just gave that experience with Pastor Edley and
Mhm.
how God was really speaking to you to that
Yeah.
day. And it's interesting. So have you ever thought about that? Like, let me ask this question. Like,
Mhm.
after that experience and and now that you're in seminary, have you ever thought like, man, I wish I could go back in time, get in a DeLorean or a time machine and go tell my younger self, like, don't listen to these naysayers, the Holy Spirit has a special something special for you.
Part of me wants to say yes, but part of me also says no. The reason why, if I could go back and speak to my younger self, I would tell myself, yes, no matter what anyone says to you, follow the Lord. And that the road is going to be bumpy, but follow the Lord. He knows what he's doing. But I wouldn't tell myself everything because I had to have those experiences with God in order to trust him. Like I had to go through the moments of doubt. I had to go through the moments of it feels like, the world is telling me no and you're the only one, Lord, telling me to move forward because it caused me to depend on him 100%. So I don't think I would have changed much. I would have just told myself no matter what, listen to God.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. It's like you wouldn't exchange your road for anything.
No.
Got it.
It's so
Got
funny, but maybe that's what they call wisdom. You gain wisdom. I wouldn't now. There's a song. Fantasia did a rendition of it, and that's why it got became popular. But it's called "Necessary," and the song is saying, "I am who I am today because God used my mistakes," and it's basically saying your journey was necessary. And the way that I see my journey, I say, thank God for every bump in the road, for every problem, for every issue, for every naysayer, because I don't think I would have depended heavily on God the way that I do now had I not gone through those things. Yeah.
Oh, that's so beautiful. It's like you find, even though during the low places in your life you're like, man,
Yeah.
why am I here? Oh, but then you get to the high place and you look down and you say, man, thank goodness I was there so I could appreciate
Yeah.
the high place.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're basically saying.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So, Sarah, you know I will go here because I've done this many, many a time. You are Haitian and you
Yes.
grew up in the Haitian church.
Yes.
Um, could you let us know, like, what part of the country and like how was your upbringing, kind of?
Okay, so I was born and raised in Long Island, New York. Um, but I was raised in a Haitian household, so it's like you're it's like you're really being raised in a little Haiti kind of a thing. Um, yeah, but that was it. I was okay, so in my upbringing, I will say this though. I went to church on Saturdays with my mom, but when I was babysat by my aunt, I went to church on Sundays.
Mhm.
And that's where I went to a few I in my childhood I experienced a few different churches from Baptist to even the Catholic church, but because I was being babysat by my aunt. But a majority of my time was in the Haitian Seventh-day Adventist church. Yeah.
No. Wow. So when you talk about your upbringing in the Haitian Seventh Day Adventist Church, what word comes to your mind?
You know, wow. I have to be honest.
Please be
I
honest.
think my first answer would be painful.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
wish I could say something different, but I have to be honest. I'm going to say the first thing that comes to my mind is the word painful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, it, I, I- I'm
You asked.
I'm stammering, but the question I
Yeah.
have to ask is, could you elaborate on why that's the first thing that came to your mind?
I would say it was painful because, and I don't think the Haitian church is the only church who has experienced this. This is just my experience with my church, with my culture. Um, I think the extreme conservativeness and a lot of the hypocrisy as well. Um, I think when I started off in church as a kid, right, when you don't really get into any positions, you love it. You go to Sabbath school, you have fun, you're on fire for God, you believe you can do anything and everything, and everyone's encouraging you. But once you start getting into the positions, you don't realize that you're getting into politics, and cliques and clans and things like that. And then once that starts happening and you see the hypocrisy behind the scenes, I think that it burns you. And I often tell my friends that I feel like I was so on fire for God at one point. I didn't care about what anyone had to say about me or think about me. I just wanted to do what God wanted me to do. And then I got into positions in the church and I felt like I lost myself. And I went from trying to please God to trying to please people.
Mm,
And it's only recently that I finally shook that off again because it's you can't please God and please people at the same time. Um, but that's what I learned. And it's also painful because I see how so many of my loved ones And when I say my loved ones, this is where I go from just talking about the Haitian church to all the churches. My Hispanic friends, my friends from different cultures, African American friends, how they all just left the church for the same reasons. And it's for the same things. Like I have people who I love and care about, who I know have left the church. Some people I know left the faith entirely for what they experience with the people inside the church and the pain and the hypocrisy and the judgment and the prejudice and all of these things. And when I think about that, for me, it's just painful. It's so, so painful because I think what happens is when you get hurt by the church, you get scarred in a way that you kind of begin to see Christ as the people that have hurt you.
Mm.
And so instead of just leaving the church, I see how many of the people I care about kind of left Christ as well. Some of them hold on strong, and I'm so happy about that. But many of them left Christ as well. And that's just painful. Yeah.
Wow. It's something that once again I'm gonna say it's not an isolated incident. It's
Mhm.
something that I've seen a lot of, and the reason I talk about it is because I love the Haitian STA community,
Yeah.
and I think there's nothing like it, but it's something that we need to talk about and be honest about in the
Yeah.
fact that um, we gotta show love to our young people.
Yeah.
Gotta encourage them. We gotta have honest conversations with them. We
Yeah.
got to, one thing if you don't mind, Sarah, if thing that's coming on my mind is I think of all the times I got advice about in ministry in particular, and the advice was tailored to please people rather than God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why I'm mentioning that because you said something that I think is really key is when you stopped pleasing people,
Yeah.
um, you started pleasing God and you found joy and peace. And
Yeah.
well, at least for me, I found joy and peace, and it was
Yeah.
extremely liberating
Yeah.
when I stopped,
Yeah.
I stopped following these certain, laws that they
Yeah.
were put on me, not not biblical laws, but laws that they said you got to
Amen.
do it like this, or you're not gonna um, be accepted.
Listen,
And yeah,
in every church that I have gone to, I notice that whatever the predominant culture is, whatever is taught religiously, it's often the culture that is taught, not necessarily the religion. And what I try to explain to some of my loved ones is what you're running away from is not necessarily the Adventist church and the Adventist message. It's not even, you know what I'm saying? You're
yes,
running away from things that are toxic within your culture. Do not get them mixed up. But it's hard when you're only raised in one context to understand that no, this is something that occurs within your church, within your culture. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is biblical. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is God Himself. So I guess it's you kind of have to, whatever church you're raised in, and in our context, the Haitian church, you have to look at what is biblical, what is of God, and what is not. And what is not, don't let it stress you out. You hold on to what is of God and what is of Him, what is biblical, um, to enrich your relationship with Him.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's and I think this is a conversation I've had over and over, and I
Yeah.
will continue to have it because it's something that will um, we will see if this starts happening. You will see young people embracing the church,
Oh, yeah.
embracing, um, because if I think about it, you said that the term toxic things in the culture, um, these are things that we should want to hold on to. Period. No
Mm,
matter what culture it is, Haitian, Seventh-day Adventists, um, you name the ethnicity, you name the style of life. If there's something that's toxic in it, you don't need it. It's not something that we
Mhm.
should hold on to and say,
Mhm.
well, it's something that my parents and my parents before,
Mhm.
this is why things such as racism,
Mhm.
sexism, misogyny,
Exactly.
you go down the list. These are things that we don't need to have anymore. Um, Especially when we educate ourselves and we care about other people. And Sarah, this is why I'm not I am such a person who talks about this all the time.
Mm.
I love young people and I
Yeah.
don't want to see them leave the church.
Yeah.
The light bulb clicked one day and I saw that this is the reason. It's
Yeah.
because we are putting something ahead of
Yeah.
our love of God and our love of people.
And one thing I think too, Eric, because I don't want to forget it. When at first seeing young people leave the church, right? That's alarming and that's scary. No, they're leaving the church and forget just the church, they're leaving God Himself, right? That's scary. But then I started to look at it. Why are they leaving? And when you look at why they are leaving, that they are leaving because they see injustice, that they're leaving because they see hypocrisy, that they're leaving because they see things that are done wrong. Now I have to look at it in a positive light. That's a good thing, that their eyes are open, that they can see this is not how it's supposed to be. Now, how do we take that positive thing? Okay, they see that this is not a good thing and show them that it's okay to recognize that something is wrong, but it's not okay to leave God Himself. And it's not okay to, how do I say this? Let me word this like this. Sometimes when you see something wrong, it's because you're called to be a change in it. It's because you're called to come and do something different and be something different. So, how do I, now seeing the issue, Lord, how do I strengthen my relationship with you that I can be in the church, but I can represent you and not do the very things that have been done to me?
Mm.
If that makes sense.
Yes, it makes so much sense. And I love how you said that you see it in a positive light, and that's a positive thing. That means they our young people dislike injustice. Our
Yeah,
young people dislike hypocrisy. These
yeah.
are things that Jesus
That's
disliked.
not like.
So we are teaching them who Jesus is. So they recognize who Jesus is and they
Yeah,
like him. And that's the interesting thing. They like Jesus,
yeah,
but they have a problem with those who say that they are followers of Jesus. And it
yes.
sounds similar to that famous quote by Gandhi. And I I have no problem with your Jesus. It's
Mhm.
your Christians I have a problem with.
Christians.
And I think one of the reasons I have this podcast is I want all generations to hear this and say, we got to listen. We got to listen first.
Yeah.
We got to listen first. We got to close our mouths. And one thing, Sarah, I don't know if you notice, when they do have the intergenerational conversation, I saw this actually watching on a live stream of a church. They had a pastor and some young people, and the young people were telling how they feel about the church and stuff like that. And one thing I saw that they did incorrectly, the pastor, is the young person said, this is what I experienced. This is how I feel when you come at me in this way. It diminishes me and pushes away my feelings and stuff like that. And then the pastor said, "Well, you gotta understand. This is what." And then I said, "No,
Mm.
don't do that. When a young person comes and says this, and this, what we gotta do is close before we say you got to understand no, no, no,
Mhm.
close that mouth and say take a drink. I'll illustrate for those who are watching the podcast. I'm drinking some water. You got to
Yes.
drink some water and say, oh, okay, tell me more.
Mm.
Instead of, well, because this is what happens when they do that. They're basically saying, I'm not going to change.
Yeah.
basically you need to learn to be okay with what I do.
Yeah.
And a young person with intelligence and reasoning saying, no,
Mhm.
I explained that to you so you can change because what you're doing is incorrect, especially at least if you want a relationship with me. And
Mm.
if you just diminish, I have to move on. I have to go find somewhere else.
Yeah.
So have you witnessed that? Have you seen that?
Oh, my former church get in trouble. Um, yeah, they had many of those meetings that weren't successful to the point that, you hear when the youth are like, I'm not going to another meeting. I'm not going to another discussion. Um,
Wow.
so I see it and I see it a lot. And sometimes I wonder to myself, um, will anyone get it that we have to actually listen,
Mm,
you know? But
wow.
then again, maybe that's, you're here and I'm here, and maybe that's why we're here, because God is sending forth people who do listen and who do understand and who do want to hear what the youth have to say. And maybe that's why I feel like there's a shaking and happening, but I don't, I don't want
You
no conspiracy.
no.
I
Oh man.
I just find it a little odd that it seems like everything's being shaken around us. And maybe that is happening for a reason, because God's people are standing up and saying, we want to do different.
Mm, wow. Wow. You said you didn't want to, but I have a feeling that I'm going to say it then. So it'll come on me. I'll get in trouble. If you're saying there's a shakening, I completely agree
Right,
with you totally because
right.
the Seventh Day Adventist Church, its identity was made with forefathers who were younger than actually I am now. Sister White started when she was a teenager. James
Yeah,
White started in his early 20s.
yeah.
And it's really interesting that in the year 2020, the young
Mhm,
people who were able to really function well on social media,
mhm,
YouTube, knew how to use Zoom, knew how to light their screens and actually
mhm.
talk to the webcam and use technology. All of a sudden, they became the most crucial and important people in our church today of
Yep,
all cultures, all
yep,
denominations, because we went into a pandemic. And
yep.
if you want to say that's a shakening, I completely agree because
Or said, oh, you don't want to use them still?
yeah, God basically said, "Listen, I have a prophecy, and it's gonna happen."
And it's
Uh,
gonna happen,
so
whether you
if
like
you
it or not.
there you go. God made a 12-year-old rebuke a high priest.
Yeah,
So that's in the Bible.
yes,
So
yes,
you think you can't do something to make young people become the leaders and
yeah,
the ministers of today? And 2020 was the
yeah,
year. 2020 was the year. I
yeah,
mean, people were dismissing a lot of these leaders, and then all of a sudden they had to come knocking on our doors.
yes.
I'm
I
not
don't know
saying,
how to use the Zoom. I need help with the Zoom. I need help with the internet, with the Snapchat, all of them.
uh,
Yeah.
yes, it's so basically what I think what you're saying and what I'm saying is if there is a time to listen to young people
Yes.
and empower them, it's now.
It's
It's
now.
it's now. There's the time has the clock has run out. It is the
Yeah.
midnight hour. The statistics are out, the data is out, and the world has give empowered us. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're not Sarah, let me say this. If you're not empowering your young person in the church right now, there is a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah.
There is a social media initiative that will give them some good money,
Yeah.
empower them, and you will be kicking yourself.
Yeah. And God's work will be done with or without you. And this, I think, is not only a warning for the older generation that's still trying to hold on, it's for even the middle generation, right? So, 20s to 40s, kind of 50s, kind of thing. I'm gonna cut it at 40, or maybe a little above 40.
Yep.
For us not to become that.
Mm,
and try to hold on to things and not pass it on, because God's work, God's will be done with or without you. So it's either you partake in helping this next generation take their place and train them and love them and care for them, or God will send someone else.
mm,
It's going to happen. And I think that's what a lot of people are experiencing now, with their churches dying right before their very eyes,
wow.
you know?
Um, you mentioned a really powerful thing in the fact that the middle generation, so the because right now, I'll just be honest, the majority of SDA leadership, at least in the North American division, is administratively. I don't know that much about pastor. I think the average age of a pastor is a little over 40.
Mhm.
Um, they are very close to retirement, and most of them are, yeah, the baby boomer generation. So there is
Mhm.
going to be a massive shift where you're
Yeah.
going to see a lot of Gen X and older millennials
Yeah.
now come into power. But this is a cautionary tale in the fact that once we get it, not to
Don't do the
ex-
same thing.
don't exclude Gen Z and the
Yeah.
Alpha generation. Got it.
Especially not during the end times, because God isn't playing.
That's right. That's right.
It's
Yeah.
either you get it together or he's going to move you along. If there was ever a time for us to put down our differences and put down our preferences, it's now.
Mm,
Because God, it just feels like God is almost weeding us out. Um, and it's either you are a part of what God is doing or you're not. And I think that's where I see such society going. Like, people are clear now about, to be honest, even with this election, the stuff that I saw people posting on Facebook, who are going to sit here and probably sit next to me in Sabbath school, people are very clear now with the evil that's in their heart or the love that's in their heart. People are going out of their ways for ministry, and people are going out of their ways to make it clear that they have hatred in their heart. And I feel like society is moving towards this. It's either you are with God or you're not, you know?
wow.
You're either
Yeah.
helping his people or you're not. Um,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that. It's like, wow. Yeah, I never really saw it like that. It's like it's becoming more clear.
Oh, yeah.
But what's interesting about it, and let me put my take on it, is that it's becoming more clear to those that have discernment and actually really have a close relationship with God, because
Mhm.
they're the ones that are saying, "Uh-oh." But the ones that don't have they have a false, and
Mm,
so they're thinking that they are correct and that they
mm.
are safe when it's yeah, wow, wow,
Wow.
yeah. So Sarah, um thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me, but I definitely want to ask you a few questions, and one of them
Yes.
is, you get to have a church. They give you a church.
Mhm,
Praise the Lord. You finish seminary and they give you a church, and they even make you senior pastor. All
mhm,
right. Um, and that should happen one day. Uh,
mhm,
but that happens, and now you have this influence and leadership position over, God's people, over this flock. How would you promote intergenerational relationship, mentorship, um, making sure the youth are empowered within your
mhm.
church?
I think for me personally, it's I'm just gonna say it how it is. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I think for me, it's not an option. The way that I can show them that they are empowered is to make sure that they have positions where they are empowered. Um, in terms of intergenerational, I would have to go according to how God leads, because I know no matter what, right? Because it's not about people pleasing, it's about pleasing God. I know that there are some places that God will send you and he's going to say, listen, whoever's against it, just shut them down and keep doing what you're supposed to do. Put people in position where they're supposed to be. And there's some places where God is going to say, tread softly, because it's not that their heart is in the wrong place, it's that they don't understand. So I feel like I would have to go in the guidance of the Holy Spirit. But one thing is for sure is to empower the youth. I have to make sure that they have positions within the church, even if that means creating positions for them. Because sometimes people want to hold on so much to certain things, and you have to kind of create things before they're willing to let them go. If that makes sense.
Wow, awesome. Yeah, beautiful sense. It's like, at that position you can really emphasize and say in the mission that, hey, this is our identity.
Yes.
And I think that's basically crucial when it comes to youth ministry. We have to remind people that this is our identity. Our identity is empowering young people and letting the Holy Spirit use them in a mighty way. And that doesn't mean um, stepping down and you get to be inactive. What it means is you're actually more active because you're training the next generation, and that is actually that's more work actually.
Yeah.
But when we're telling the older generation we need to give the young people a chance, and then some of them are like, well, then I'm gonna have to be the one sitting down. No, you're the one that's now going to be teaching and training,
Yeah.
and when they have an issue, you're the one they're going to be calling. So you're actually going to be more busy, but also it's more fulfilling because you get to
I love
see.
how you said that, because in any church that is really functioning, nobody should be sitting down. It's just that the position, but then again, this goes back to culture, right? Certain cultures, certain positions are associated with status. And so someone giving up their position almost feels like they're giving up their status. And I
Yes.
think in our Haitian church, we have that too. To be the head elder or the
Oh,
head deacon, that's
oh.
my status. And so when you take that away from me, it's almost like you're taking away my significance or importance. And so, and so, but if we did not have that, everyone would be doing what they're supposed to be doing within the church, because you don't feel like one is higher than the other.
Sarah, you just you just you just said something that I'm about to go into a rant right now because it's something that has been on my heart for so long. I've been talking about this for a while. The whole issue of uh, pos- when you're waiting for a title to be bestowed upon you
Yeah.
instead of just knowing that you have it because God has called you for it. That is
Mhm.
such a major deal in the fact that now that you have, because this is what happens when you tie status to a position. Once you have it, now you actually are going to sit
Yeah.
because that's your goal. Your goal is to be held elder. Your goal is to be an elder. So now what you're gonna do?
Mhm.
You're gonna sit because
Yeah.
you have reached your goal. You are
Yeah.
complete. And what it is in the church and ministry is you are never supposed to feel that way. You're supposed to
Yeah.
feel uncomfortable with your relationship with Christ. You need to grow in it every day. You're
Yeah.
uncomfortable in how your church, because we got 4 baptisms last crusade. No, we need 20. We need
Yeah.
50. We're not comfortable. So we have relationships with 10 people in the church. No, I need relationships with all. There
Mhm.
should be no comfortability in the status or the title. Oh, I'm a master guide. Oh, I'm a pathfinder. No, 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 no. You
Yeah.
need you need to realize that God has called you for something amazing before you were even ordained by man or given a leadership is influence. And if you're not influencing anybody, you're not a leader. So
Yeah.
you need to abuse yourself, or dissociate from the feeling that title and status equals status. No,
Yes.
you are already given status by the love and life of Jesus Christ. He already died for you. You
Yeah.
are a prince in his eyes. So exalt that by doing what God has called you,
Yeah.
with or without a title.
Yes. And you know something, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be wrong, but it reminds me of how the pioneers were big on calling each other brother and sister. So it's not Dr. So and so or Pastor so and so or whatever. It was brother or sister. And now, we would think of it and say, oh, that's a little extreme. But now that I see it, think about it, I see the purpose is so that you remember you are a brother or a sister. Your title isn't your identity. And so when you come into church, you don't come into church like, oh, that's the pastor and he's higher than me. That's the head deacon, that he's higher than me too. That's the head elder, so they're higher than me too. And then, oh yeah, when we go to eat, right? All the head elders and head deacons and the pastor get to sit on the nice table with all the food served directly to them, but then I get to just go on the line. It's like we have a hierarchy in the church, but if all of that is done away with, you don't go into the church thinking this one's higher than me or this one's better than me or I'm better than this one or I'm better than that one. You go into it believing everyone here is equal. We are brothers and sisters. We just have different functions for a time.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
it reminds me of the likening of the old covenant to the new covenant.
Yeah.
You can be pastor or head elder written on a church, but if you're not that person in someone's heart, what's the point? you
Yeah.
know, Yeah, like you can have more influence with no title whatsoever,
Yeah.
zero titles, and you can be the person that young people go to, that they trust, and that they know that they are loved and accepted.
Yeah.
Because let me tell you, the person who changed the world, the person who we still worship to this day,
Yeah.
never was ordained as an elder,
Yeah.
never had the title priest, never was given the title pastor, never was even accepted as a prophet in his
Mhm.
own town. But he still changed the world. So
You
as
changed
you can see,
everything.
yeah. So as you can see, Sarah, that's a topic that's been something I wanted to rant about. So thank you for letting me do so.
Yeah. And that's why for me, when you said, do I call you Pastor Sarah, just call you Sarah, I'm okay with being called Sarah. And this is my reasoning behind it. Um, I know that I'm going to be in the educational field. Yes, I will be preaching and pastoring, but I will be in the school system. And so for me, I think of it as I'm Sarah and I'm God's daughter. And the things that he uses, the vehicles that he uses they're just vehicles for me to do the same thing. So I go to the church and I preach, right? But I go into the schools and I teach, but my teaching and preaching, once you start to get to know me, you realize there's sometimes one and the same. um I'm just It's like he just moves me in different positions to reach different people, but really doing the same thing, representing him. That's why I'm okay when someone calls me Sarah, unless it's like, I know like some people, it's kind of a snarky thing. It's kind of a like, I'm not going to call you pastor because I don't believe. And even with them, I'm like, it is what it is. I can't force you. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is I don't mind because my identity isn't in the positions or the roles that God has me in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why I have no problem calling you pastor, because I know if God has called you that, who am I to disagree?
Mhm.
So why am I going to fight against God? So Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and giving your 2 cents, your insights, your story, which is a powerful one. As I usually do on this podcast, I end with giving the guest a chance to say some words of encouragement. So um, right now, there is a young lady out there who is being told that she can't go into ministry. What
Mm.
words of encouragement can you give that young person?
Follow Jesus. Because at the end of the day, not one of these people pay your bills. Not one of these people died for you on the cross. And it is scary, but God has you. And his call, listen, this is what I tell people. It's going to sound extreme, but this is why I tell people. I say, if there's a female pastor, I guarantee you it's either she's straight from God or she's straight from the devil. There is no in between because there is no benefit for coming into this ministry. So if God is calling you, you're going to have to trust him 100% that he knows exactly what he's doing. And it is scary. And sometimes it feels lonely. But what you begin to see is, as much as there's so many naysayers, there are also a lot of people who will see Christ through you, and they will encourage you, and they will be with you along the journey. God has friends set out for you. He has mentors sent out for you. Trust him all the way. It will be okay. So that's what I would say to any young girl. Go, 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 and follow the Lord all the way. He has you 100%.